Some secrets are buried by families, others bury themselves, and sometimes, years later, something comes back looking for the truth. In the spring of 2021, we received an email from a college student in Pennsylvania who claimed he had experienced something that still haunted him years later. At first, his story sounded like a typical relationship drama. A young couple, a stressful semester, a few strange incidents, nothing unusual. But the deeper we went into his account, the more disturbing it became. For privacy reasons, all names and locations have been changed. The young man who shared this story will be called Mason. His girlfriend will be called Olivia. At the time, Mason was studying mechanical engineering at a university outside Pittsburgh. Olivia attended a college about an hour away. They had been dating for nearly a year and spent most weekends together. Like many couples their age, they had a favorite place, a small community park on the edge of a recently built neighborhood. The area was quiet because many of the homes were still empty. Most evenings, the park was completely deserted. That was exactly why they liked it. No crowds, no noise, just a peaceful place where they could spend time together. Everything was normal until a cold evening in late March. Mason had just returned to his apartment after classes when his phone rang. The caller was Olivia. He answered immediately. The moment she spoke, something felt wrong. Her voice sounded tense. Not sad, not angry, just strangely tense. "Mason, can you meet me at the park?" He checked the clock. It was getting late. "Tonight?" "Yes. Can it wait until tomorrow?" Silence filled the line. Then Olivia spoke again, but her voice sounded different, lower, colder, almost like someone trying to imitate her. "Are you coming?" Mason sat upright on his bed. A chill crawled through his body. What is going on? Several seconds passed. Then Olivia whispered something that made his stomach tighten. "If you do not come, she might disappear again." The call ended. Mason stared at his phone. His mind raced with questions. Who was she talking about? Who might disappear? And why had she sounded so strange? He immediately called her back. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Within minutes, he grabbed his keys and headed toward the park. The entire drive felt uncomfortable. Dark clouds hung low across the sky. A cold wind pushed through the empty roads, and an uneasy feeling followed him the entire way. Nearly 40 minutes later, Mason arrived. The park looked abandoned. The swings creaked softly in the wind. Dead leaves rolled across the pathways. No children, no joggers, no visitors, and no Olivia. He checked the parking lot. Empty. He called her again. The phone rang. No answer. He walked toward the center of the park, scanning every corner. Nothing. After several minutes, frustration replaced concern. He was about to call one final time when a hand suddenly touched his shoulder. Mason nearly jumped out of his skin. He spun around. Olivia was standing behind him. For a moment he felt relieved. Then he noticed her expression. She was staring directly at him, without smiling, without blinking. "You took long enough," she said quietly. Mason frowned. "I called you at least 6 times. She ignored the question completely. Instead, she stepped forward and hugged him. Her arms felt unusually cold, almost freezing. Mason brushed the thought aside. Olivia had been under tremendous pressure lately. Final exams were approaching. She barely slept. She constantly complained about headaches. Maybe stress was finally catching up with her. They sat together on a nearby bench. Mason talked while Olivia mostly listened. Every few minutes she glanced toward the woods beyond the park, the same direction every time, as if she were watching someone standing among the trees. Mason eventually noticed. "What are you looking at?" Olivia immediately looked away. "Nothing." The answer came too quickly. Nearly 20 minutes passed. The sun disappeared completely. The park grew darker. The shadows between the trees seemed deeper than before. Then Olivia suddenly stood up. Her body became rigid. Her eyes focused on something behind Mason. Something only she could see. Her face instantly lost all color. "Mason." Her voice trembled. "We need to leave." Mason turned around. The area behind him was empty. There was nothing except trees and darkness. What happened? Olivia grabbed his wrist. The moment she touched him, he felt how cold her hand was. Not cool, not chilly, ice cold. "Mason, please. We have to leave right now." For the first time that evening, he saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not anxiety, not stress, fear. The kind of fear that appears when someone sees something they were never supposed to see. And whatever Olivia believed was standing among those trees, it had terrified her. Without another word, she pulled Mason toward the park exit. Neither of them noticed the figure standing motionless between the trees, watching them leave. Mason looked back one last time as they hurried toward the parking lot. The trees stood perfectly still. The path behind them was empty. Whatever Olivia thought she had seen was gone. Or perhaps it had never been there at all. Once they reached the car, Mason expected her to explain everything. Instead, she sat quietly in the passenger seat and stared out the window. The entire drive felt uncomfortable. Every attempt at conversation ended after only a few words. Olivia seemed distracted, as if part of her attention was focused somewhere else, somewhere far away. About 15 minutes later, they arrived at a small diner they often visited. Normally, Olivia loved the place. She always ordered the same meal. She always sat by the window, and she always talked nonstop. Tonight was different. She barely touched her food. Most of the time she simply stared at the table. Mason finally leaned forward. "Olivia, what happened back there?" She looked up at him. A confused expression crossed her face. "Back where?" "The park. What about it?" Mason laughed nervously. "Are you serious?" "You were terrified." Olivia stared at him for several seconds. Then she slowly shook her head. "Mason, what are you talking about?" A cold feeling spread through his chest. "You do not remember." "Remember what?" "You kept looking toward the woods. You said we had to leave." Olivia frowned. "I never said that." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Mason could tell she was being honest. She genuinely looked confused, as if the last 30 minutes had completely disappeared from her memory. Trying not to make things worse, he changed the subject. The rest of dinner passed quietly. Later that night, he dropped her off at her apartment. Before leaving, he asked if she was feeling okay. Olivia smiled weakly. "Just tired." Mason watched her walk inside. Something told him that answer was not true. Over the next few weeks, things became stranger. Olivia's headaches grew worse. Sometimes she would stop talking in the middle of a sentence and stare into space. Other times she would forget small details that had happened only hours earlier. At first, Mason blamed stress. Final exams were approaching. Both of them were exhausted. But deep down, he knew something else was happening. One afternoon, Olivia called him while crying. Her voice shook so badly he could barely understand her. "Mason, I had the dream again." "The same dream? What dream?" There was silence. Then she answered, "The woman." Mason sat upright. This was the first time he had heard about any dream. "What woman?" "I do not know. She keeps appearing. Every night." Olivia explained that for nearly 2 weeks she had been having the same nightmare. She would find herself standing inside an old house. The house looked unfamiliar. Dust covered the furniture. The walls were cracked, and every room felt abandoned. Then she would hear footsteps upstairs. Slow footsteps, getting closer. Every time she followed the sound, she would discover a woman standing at the end of a hallway. The woman never moved, never spoke, never blinked. She simply stared, waiting, watching. The strange part was that the woman's face was always hidden by darkness. No matter how close Olivia got, she could never see it. But each night the figure seemed closer, and each night Olivia woke up feeling more exhausted. A few days later, exams ended and students began leaving campus for summer break. Olivia returned to her family's home in rural West Virginia. Mason stayed behind in Pennsylvania. For a while, things seemed normal again. The nightmares stopped, the headaches improved, and their daily phone calls sounded much happier. Then one evening, during a casual conversation, Olivia mentioned something unusual. "You know what is strange?" "What?" "My family never talks about my grandmother's older sister." Mason remembered hearing about her before, only briefly. According to Olivia, the woman had died decades ago. But whenever anyone mentioned her name, the subject immediately changed. No explanations, no stories, nothing. Almost as if the family wanted everyone to forget she had ever existed. Mason laughed. Maybe there is some old family drama. Maybe, but Olivia did not sound convinced. A week later, something happened that would change everything. Something that would force a long-buried secret back into the light. And it started with a phone call from home. A phone call that left Olivia's entire family terrified. The phone call came just after midnight. Mason was studying in his apartment when his screen lit up. Olivia was calling. The moment he answered, he could hear panic in her voice. "Mason, something happened." He immediately stood up. "What happened?" "It is my grandfather." For a second, Mason thought someone had become sick, but Olivia quickly explained. Earlier that evening, her grandfather had been helping supervise repairs on an old storage building located on family property. The structure had been abandoned for years. Very few people ever went near it. According to Olivia, everything seemed normal until sunset. That was when her grandfather suddenly collapsed. Not from illness, not from a heart attack. Something had struck him, hard. A piece of concrete had fallen from above and hit his shoulder with tremendous force. The impact knocked him to the ground. Doctors later confirmed that if the concrete had landed only a few inches higher, it would have crushed his skull. The accident made no sense. There had been nobody on the roof. Nobody working above him. Nothing that should have fallen. Yet somehow it happened. Olivia's family considered it a strange accident, but her grandmother did not. The old woman reportedly became extremely upset after hearing what happened. She locked herself in her room for nearly an hour. When she finally came out, she looked pale and frightened. Several times she repeated the same sentence. It should not have started again. When Olivia told Mason this detail, both of them became silent. What does that mean? I do not know. She refuses to explain. The following days were filled with tension. Olivia noticed that every time her grandfather entered a room, her grandmother watched him with a strange expression, almost as if she expected something terrible to happen. Meanwhile, another problem appeared. The nightmares returned. This time they were worse, far worse. The abandoned house was still there. The dark hallway was still there. But now the woman was getting closer. Every night, closer. And for the first time, she spoke. Only 3 words. The same 3 words every night. Find the truth. Nothing else. No explanation. No answers. Just those words. Find the truth. A week later, Olivia called Mason again. Her voice sounded exhausted. I think I found something. What? My grandmother finally told me a little about her sister. Mason immediately paid attention. According to Olivia, her grandmother had only agreed to speak after repeated requests. Even then, she revealed very little, only that her older sister had disappeared almost 30 years earlier. The family claimed she had run away. No police report, no investigation, no explanation. One day she was simply gone. Whenever Olivia asked what happened after that, her grandmother refused to answer. The conversation ended immediately. But one detail stood out. Her grandmother became visibly nervous whenever she mentioned an old farmhouse that once belonged to the family. A farmhouse that had been abandoned for decades, located deep in the woods several miles from town. That same night, Olivia dreamed about the house again. Except this time it was different. She was no longer standing inside an unfamiliar building. She was standing in front of the farmhouse. The exact farmhouse her grandmother had mentioned. Moonlight illuminated the broken windows. The front porch sagged dangerously. Dead vines covered the walls. And standing near the front door was the same woman, watching, waiting. This time Olivia could see part of her face. Only part. Enough to notice blood running from a wound above her forehead. Enough to notice tears streaming down her cheeks. Enough to hear one final sentence before waking up. They lied. Olivia woke up screaming. The entire house rushed into her room. Her grandmother entered last. The moment she heard the details of the dream, all color drained from her face. For several seconds, the old woman simply stared at Olivia. Then she whispered something that nobody expected. A sentence that froze everyone in the room. She wants people to know what happened. And before anyone could ask another question, her grandmother began crying. The room fell silent. Nobody knew what to say. Olivia's grandmother sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor while tears rolled down her face. For years, she had refused to discuss her older sister. Now she looked like someone carrying a burden that had become too heavy to hide. Olivia slowly moved closer. Grandma, what happened to her? The old woman closed her eyes. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she finally spoke. Some secrets destroy families. The sentence only made everyone more confused. Olivia's grandfather immediately interrupted. That's enough. His voice was sharp. Much sharper than usual. We are not discussing this anymore. The reaction caught everyone's attention. Normally, he was calm and patient. Tonight, he looked nervous, almost frightened. Olivia noticed it too. For the rest of the evening, neither grandparent spoke another word about the subject. The next morning, Olivia called Mason. She told him everything. The strange reaction, the tears, the silence, her grandfather's sudden anger. None of it made sense. But one thing was becoming clear. The family knew more than they were willing to admit. Several days later, Olivia returned to Pennsylvania for the start of summer classes. The moment she arrived, Mason noticed something was wrong. She looked exhausted. Dark circles had formed beneath her eyes. And although she tried to act normal, she constantly seemed distracted, as if she were listening for something, or someone. A week passed, then another. The nightmares continued. Every single night, the woman kept appearing. The old farmhouse kept appearing. And each dream revealed a little more. The hallway, the staircase, the kitchen, the back door. It felt less like a dream and more like a memory. A memory that did not belong to Olivia. One evening, Mason and Olivia rented a small cabin near a lake outside town. The trip was supposed to help her relax. For a few hours, everything seemed normal. They ordered food, watched movies, talked about classes, and for the first time in weeks, Olivia actually smiled. Then Mason made a mistake. A simple mistake. One sentence. One question. So what really happened to your grandmother's sister? The change was immediate. Olivia froze. The smile disappeared. The room became completely silent. Mason laughed nervously. Sorry, I was just curious. Olivia slowly lowered her drink onto the table. Her eyes remained fixed on the floor. Several uncomfortable seconds passed. Then she stood up. Without saying a word, without looking at him, she walked toward the far corner of the room. Mason, no response. Olivia, still nothing. A cold feeling spread through his chest. Something felt terribly wrong. She was standing perfectly still, her back facing him, not moving, not speaking, not reacting. The entire cabin suddenly felt colder. Mason slowly got up from the couch. Olivia, are you okay? At that exact moment, she turned around, and Mason felt his blood run cold, because the person staring at him did not look like Olivia anymore. Her expression was completely different. The softness in her eyes was gone, replaced by something ancient, something angry, something that looked at him as though it had known him for years. For several terrifying seconds, neither of them moved. Then Olivia spoke, but the voice that came out was not hers. It sounded older, much older. Why do you keep asking about me? Mason felt his heart pounding against his ribs. Every instinct told him to run, but fear rooted him to the floor. The woman smiled, a slow, unsettling smile. Then she took one step closer. I have been waiting a very long time for someone to listen. The cabin suddenly went silent. Even the sounds from outside had disappeared. No wind, no insects, nothing. Only that voice. And the terrifying realization that whatever had been appearing in Olivia's dreams was now standing directly in front of him, inside Olivia's body. And it had finally decided to tell its story. Mason could barely breathe. Every warning alarm in his mind was screaming at him to leave. Yet somehow, he remained frozen where he stood. The woman wearing Olivia's face slowly sat down in a chair across from him. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Then she looked directly into his eyes. I am not here to hurt you. The voice was calm, but there was sadness hidden beneath it. A sadness that sounded decades old. Mason swallowed hard. Who are you? The woman looked toward the cabin window. For a moment, she seemed lost in a memory. Then she answered. My name was Evelyn. The name meant nothing to Mason, but the second she said it, Olivia's face seemed to change. Not physically, yet somehow he could almost see another person beneath it. Someone older, someone carrying years of pain. Evelyn who? A faint smile appeared. You already know. The realization hit him immediately. The farmhouse, the dreams, the family secret. Evelyn was Olivia's grandmother's missing sister. The woman nobody wanted to talk about. The woman who supposedly disappeared. Mason felt a chill run through him. What happened to you? The smile vanished, and for the first time, anger appeared in her eyes. They lied. The same words from the dream. They lied to everyone. The cabin seemed colder now. Evelyn leaned forward. 30 years earlier, she had fallen in love with a young man named Daniel. He was kind, hardworking, and unlike most people in town, he treated her with respect. They planned a future together, but there was one problem. Olivia's family hated him, especially Evelyn's father. Arguments became constant. Threats followed. Eventually, Evelyn left home and moved away with Daniel. For a while, life was good. They got married, started building a family, and believed the worst was behind them. Then one autumn evening, everything changed. According to Evelyn, her father suddenly contacted her. After years of silence, after years of anger, he apologized. He said he missed his daughter. He wanted to make peace. He wanted his family back together. At first Evelyn did not believe him, but weeks passed. The calls continued. The apologies continued. Eventually she accepted. Against Daniel's advice, against her own instincts, she returned home. The reunion seemed perfect. Everyone smiled. Everyone acted happy. The family welcomed them with open arms. For 2 days, everything felt normal. Then came the third night. Evelyn's expression darkened. Mason noticed her hands trembling. Even after all these years, the memory still terrified her. According to Evelyn, she woke up shortly after midnight. At first she thought she heard someone arguing outside. Then came a scream. Daniel's scream. She rushed out of bed, ran through the hallway, and found him lying in the backyard, bleeding, barely alive. Several men surrounded him. Men she recognized. Family members. People she had trusted. People who had smiled at him only hours earlier. Daniel reached toward her, trying to speak, trying to warn her. Then someone struck him again. Evelyn stopped talking. The cabin remained silent. Mason felt sick. What happened next? For several seconds she did not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice had become almost a whisper. I ran. I should not have. But I ran. She explained that fear took control. She fled toward the old farmhouse behind the property. The same farmhouse from Olivia's dreams. The same building hidden deep in the woods. She thought she could hide there. She thought she could survive. She was wrong, because someone followed her into the darkness. And what happened inside that farmhouse was far worse than death. Evelyn slowly raised a trembling hand toward the scar above her forehead. The same wound Olivia had seen in every dream. The same wound that bled every night. The same wound that never healed. Then she looked directly at Mason and spoke the words that made his blood run cold. They buried me before I was dead. The room fell silent. Mason felt every hair on his body stand up, because suddenly everything made sense. The nightmares, the farmhouse, the bleeding wound, the desperate need to tell her story. Evelyn had not disappeared. She had been silenced, buried, forgotten, and for 30 years, nobody had known the truth. Or at least, that was what she wanted them to believe. Because what Mason would learn next was even more disturbing. Someone in Olivia's family had known the truth the entire time, and they had spent decades making sure it never came out. Mason sat motionless. His mind struggled to process what he had just heard. Every part of him wanted to believe there had to be another explanation. A misunderstanding. A delusion. Anything. But the emotion in Evelyn's voice felt real. Too real. The woman sitting across from him slowly looked toward the floor. I tried to tell them. Every year. No one listened. Mason forced himself to speak. If what you're saying is true, then somebody knows what happened. Evelyn nodded. A sad smile appeared on her face. Someone always knew. The cabin grew quiet again. Outside, the wind began rattling the trees. For a moment, the sound reminded Mason of distant whispers. Then Evelyn looked directly at him. My sister knew. Mason felt his stomach tighten. Olivia's grandmother. The woman who cried after hearing about the dreams. The woman who always changed the subject. The woman who seemed terrified whenever Evelyn's name was mentioned. Evelyn continued. She was young. Very young. But she saw enough. Not everything. Enough. According to Evelyn, her younger sister discovered the truth shortly after the incident. Not the entire truth. Only pieces. A bloodstained jacket. Late-night conversations. The sudden disappearance. The lies. Over time, she realized what had happened. But by then she was trapped. The family had already decided on their story. Evelyn had run away. That was the official version. That was the lie everyone would repeat. Anyone who challenged it was immediately silenced. Years passed, then decades. The people responsible grew older. Some died. Others carried the secret into old age. But one thing never changed. The fear. Because deep down, they knew what they had done. Mason leaned forward. Why Olivia? For the first time, Evelyn smiled. A genuine smile. Not frightening. Not angry. Just sad. Because she is mine. The words echoed through the cabin. Mason felt another chill crawl down his spine. Evelyn explained that from the moment Olivia was born, she had remained close to her. Watching. Protecting. Guiding. Not controlling her. Protecting her. Whenever danger approached, Evelyn claimed she tried to intervene. The strange feeling in the park. The sudden urge to leave. The figure among the trees. According to Evelyn, something else had been there that night. Something dark. Something drawn to lonely places and unresolved deaths. She refused to explain further, only saying that some places attract things that should never be disturbed. Mason remembered Olivia's terrified expression, the way she had stared toward the woods, the fear in her eyes. Maybe she really had seen something. Maybe Evelyn had saved her. Then Evelyn's expression changed. The sadness disappeared, replaced by anger. Old anger. Dangerous anger. There is one person left. The temperature inside the cabin seemed to drop. Mason immediately understood. Someone involved in her death was still alive. Who? Evelyn remained silent for several seconds. Then she answered, my brother. The words hung heavily in the air. According to Evelyn, her brother had been the one who followed her to the farmhouse, the one who struck her, the one who helped hide the truth. For 30 years he had lived an ordinary life, built a family, started a business, attended church every Sunday, all while pretending nothing had happened. And now he was old, very old. Yet Evelyn claimed he still woke up from nightmares, still feared the dark, still avoided talking about the farmhouse, because somewhere deep inside, he knew she had never forgiven him. Mason's heartbeat quickened. What are you going to do? Evelyn looked toward the darkness outside the cabin window. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she whispered, I only wanted the truth. Mason wanted to believe her, but something about the way she said it made him uneasy. Because beneath the sadness, another emotion remained. Rage. The kind of rage that survives for decades. The kind of rage that refuses to die. Suddenly Olivia's body stiffened, her eyes widened, and Evelyn looked toward the door, as though she had heard something. A second later, 3 loud knocks echoed through the cabin. Knock, knock, knock. Mason nearly jumped out of his chair. Nobody was supposed to be there. The cabin sat alone beside the lake. The nearest occupied building was almost half a mile away. Another knock shook the door, harder this time. Evelyn slowly stood. The fear that appeared on her face shocked Mason, because it was the first time she had looked afraid. Then she whispered something that made his blood run cold. That should not be here. And whatever was standing outside had been following them far longer than either of them realized. The knocking stopped. Complete silence filled the cabin. Neither Mason nor Evelyn moved. For several seconds, they simply stared at the door, waiting, listening. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. Then a scratching sound came from the other side. Slow, deliberate, like someone dragging their fingernails across wood. Mason felt his pulse racing. The sound continued for nearly 10 seconds. Then it stopped. Evelyn's expression grew darker. She looked toward the window, toward the lake, toward the darkness beyond the trees. It found us. Mason swallowed hard. What found us? Evelyn did not answer immediately. For the first time since revealing herself, she looked genuinely terrified. Not angry, not sad, terrified. Then she finally spoke. There were stories about that farmhouse long before I died. A chill ran through Mason. What stories? Evelyn slowly sat back down. Her eyes remained fixed on the door. When my family first moved there, strange things happened. People heard voices at night. Animals disappeared. Children claimed they saw someone watching them from the woods. At first everyone dismissed the stories. Small towns always create legends, ghost stories, rumors, explanations for things nobody understands. But then people started disappearing. Not many, only a few over several decades. Enough to make people nervous, not enough to attract attention. According to Evelyn, the farmhouse had originally belonged to another family nearly a century earlier. A family that abandoned the property after a series of unexplained deaths. Nobody knew exactly what happened. Records were incomplete. Witnesses were long dead. All that remained were rumors. Rumors about something living in the woods. Something that appeared after sunset. Something that seemed drawn to violence. And every time blood was spilled near the property, strange events followed. Mason listened carefully. None of it sounded real. Yet after everything he had witnessed tonight, disbelief was becoming difficult. Then another sound came from outside. A footstep. Slow, heavy, moving around the cabin. Mason immediately turned toward the window. Nothing. Only darkness. The porch light illuminated a small area near the front entrance. Everything beyond that was black. Evelyn suddenly stood. It knows you're listening. What does? The thing from the woods. Mason felt his stomach drop. The same thing from the park. The same thing Olivia had sensed. The same thing Evelyn had protected her from. Then a horrifying thought entered his mind. Is it connected to your death? Evelyn hesitated. For the first time all night, she looked uncertain. I don't know. But after I died, I saw it. Mason froze. What do you mean? The room seemed colder with every word. Evelyn explained that after her death, before she fully understood what had happened, she found herself trapped near the farmhouse. Days passed, then months, then years. She could not leave. And during that time she occasionally saw another presence. Never clearly. Only glimpses. A silhouette standing among the trees. Watching. Waiting. Sometimes it appeared close to the farmhouse. Other times it stood far away. But it was always there. Always observing. As if it were feeding on the pain attached to the property. The grief. The fear. The violence. Everything. Suddenly the lights inside the cabin flickered. Once. Twice. Then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. Mason's heart nearly stopped. For a moment neither of them could see anything. Only the faint moonlight entering through the windows. Then something moved outside. A shape. Tall. Unnaturally tall. Crossing in front of the window. Mason only saw it for a second. But that was enough. It was not a person. No human being moved like that. The figure seemed too thin. Too long. Its arms hung almost to its knees. And its head tilted at an impossible angle. The shape vanished before Mason could fully process what he had seen. The lights suddenly came back. The cabin returned to normal. Except neither of them felt normal anymore. Mason turned toward Evelyn, but she was no longer looking at the window. She was staring directly behind him. Her eyes filled with horror. Real horror. The kind that cannot be faked. Slowly, very slowly, Mason turned around. Written across the wall behind the couch were 3 words. Words that had not been there seconds earlier. Words scratched deep into the wood. You found her. The message stretched almost 6 feet across the wall. Fresh splinters littered the floor beneath it, as though invisible claws had carved the letters moments ago. Neither Mason nor Evelyn spoke, because both of them understood the same thing. Whatever had been following them, whatever haunted the woods near the farmhouse, it knew exactly who Evelyn was, and now it knew that Mason knew too. Then Olivia suddenly screamed. Not Evelyn. Olivia. For the first time in hours, she was fighting her way back. But she wasn't screaming because of the message. She was staring at the window. At something standing outside. Something neither Mason nor Evelyn had noticed. And whatever she was looking at had a face. A face she recognized. A face that should have been dead for 30 years. Olivia's scream echoed through the cabin. Mason spun toward the window. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it. For a split second, he saw a figure standing near the tree line. A woman, motionless, watching. Then she was gone, vanished into the darkness. The moment she disappeared, Olivia collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. Ethan. Mason frowned. Ethan? Olivia looked confused. I did not say that. But she had. Both Mason and Evelyn had heard it. The problem was neither of them knew anyone named Ethan. A heavy silence followed. Then Evelyn slowly walked toward the window. Her eyes narrowed. That's impossible. Mason looked at her. What is? Evelyn remained silent for several seconds. Finally she answered. The woman outside. Who was she? Evelyn's expression darkened. She died before I did. A chill ran through the cabin. For the first time since revealing herself, Evelyn looked genuinely unsettled, as though something had happened that even she could not explain. Then Olivia suddenly grabbed her head. Another memory was surfacing. Fragments, images, voices. She could see an old farmhouse, a stormy night, mud, rain, and a lantern glowing near the back entrance. The images flashed through her mind like broken pieces of film. Then she saw something else. Someone, a little boy standing near the woods, watching everything, watching the farmhouse, watching the people entering it, watching the people leaving it. Olivia gasped. There was a witness. Evelyn immediately turned toward her. What? A boy. He saw what happened. The cabin fell silent. For 30 years everyone had assumed there were no witnesses, no evidence, nothing. But if a child had seen what happened that night, everything changed. Evelyn moved closer. What did he look like? Olivia squeezed her eyes shut, trying to hold on to the vision. He was maybe 10 years old. Blonde hair, blue jacket. He was hiding near the trees. Then another image appeared. A face, older now. Wrinkled, gray hair, still alive. Olivia's eyes flew open. He never left town. Mason stared at her. You know who he is? Slowly, Olivia nodded. The memory felt impossible, yet somehow she knew. The witness was now an elderly man living less than 20 miles from the abandoned farmhouse. And according to the vision, he had carried the truth his entire life, without telling anyone, without going to the police, without exposing what happened. Evelyn looked stunned. For decades she had believed nobody knew. Now she was learning someone had seen everything. Someone who might finally prove her story. Then the lights flickered again. The room instantly grew cold, much colder than before. Every window in the cabin rattled violently. The wind outside suddenly roared, and from somewhere deep in the forest came a sound. A scream. Not human, not animal. Something else. Something ancient. The noise echoed across the lake before disappearing into the night. Mason felt pure terror. Even Evelyn looked afraid. Then a realization struck him. A horrible realization. What if it doesn't want the truth revealed? Evelyn slowly turned toward him. For the first time all night, she looked uncertain, because deep down she already knew the answer. Whatever haunted the woods had remained hidden for generations, and now they were getting closer to the truth than anyone ever had. The scratching sound suddenly returned, this time from the roof. Slow, heavy, moving directly above them. Something was crawling across the cabin, and it was listening. The scratching continued above them, slow, deliberate, as if something was pacing across the roof. Neither Mason nor Olivia moved. Even Evelyn remained silent. For several minutes, the sound continued. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The cabin became completely quiet. No wind, no footsteps, nothing. Only silence. By sunrise, none of them had slept. The moment daylight arrived, Evelyn insisted they leave. According to her, whatever had followed them seemed weaker during the day. Not gone, just weaker. Mason did not argue. Within an hour, he and Olivia were driving toward the small town from Olivia's vision. The town sat deep in the hills of West Virginia, a place where everyone seemed to know everyone. A place where old secrets survived longer than the people who created them. Finding the witness was easier than expected. His name was Walter Hayes, 82 years old, retired, living alone on a small property outside town. When they arrived, Walter was sitting on his front porch. The moment he saw Olivia, all color drained from his face. He looked as though he had seen a ghost. Maybe he had. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Walter whispered something that instantly changed everything. "You have her eyes." Olivia froze. "So you knew her?" Walter closed his eyes. Slowly, he nodded. For a long time he said nothing. Then he invited them inside. The old man's hands trembled as he poured coffee. He looked exhausted, like someone who had been carrying a burden for far too long. Finally, he began speaking. 30 years earlier, he had been a curious boy exploring the woods near the farmhouse. That night he saw several vehicles arrive. He recognized some of the people, local families, respected people, people nobody would ever suspect. At first he thought it was a gathering. Then he heard screaming. Walter described seeing a young woman running toward the farmhouse, terrified, injured, trying to escape. Moments later several men followed her. One of them carried a lantern. Another carried a shovel. Mason felt his stomach tighten. Walter's voice shook. "I should have told someone, but I was a child. I was afraid." Tears filled the old man's eyes. Then he revealed the detail that nobody expected. The woman was not alone. There was something else in those woods, something watching from the trees. The same tall figure Mason had seen outside the cabin. Walter described it perfectly. The impossible height, the long arms, the unnatural movements. He said it never approached the farmhouse. It simply watched, watching the woman, watching the men, watching everything. Then Walter told them what happened after Evelyn was buried. And the story became even darker. A few nights later, he returned to the farmhouse. Curiosity had overcome his fear. What he found there haunted him for the rest of his life. The grave had been disturbed. The soil was torn apart, not dug, torn, as though something had clawed through it. Walter never saw a body, never saw Evelyn, but he did see tracks leading into the woods. Tracks unlike anything he had ever seen before. Not human, not animal, something in between, something impossible. When Walter finished speaking, the room fell silent. Olivia looked toward Evelyn. The spirit seemed frozen, confused, almost frightened, because this was information even she did not know. For 30 years, Evelyn had believed she died in that grave. Now another possibility existed. Something may have found her first. Something that had been living near the farmhouse long before her death. And suddenly Mason understood the terrifying truth. The entity in the woods wasn't following Evelyn. It had been connected to her from the very beginning. Then Walter slowly stood and walked toward a closet. From inside, he removed an old metal box. A box he had kept hidden for decades. His hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a faded photograph. The moment Olivia saw it, she stopped breathing. Because standing beside Evelyn in the photograph was the tall figure from the woods, captured in the background, watching, 30 years before anyone knew it existed. And on the back of the photograph, someone had written 6 words: "She did not leave alone." The room fell silent. Nobody took their eyes off the photograph. Walter's hands trembled as he passed it across the table. The image was old and faded, but the figure was unmistakable. Standing between the trees, watching, waiting, exactly like the thing Mason had seen outside the cabin. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Olivia looked toward Evelyn. The spirit appeared shaken. For the first time, she looked confused. Not angry, not determined. Confused. "I've never seen that photograph before." Walter nodded. "I kept it hidden. Nobody would have believed me." Mason stared at the image. One question kept repeating in his mind. If the creature had been there from the beginning, why had it remained silent for 30 years? Then Olivia suddenly grabbed the edge of the table. A violent pain shot through her head. New memories flooded her mind. Images, fragments, pieces of something hidden. And then she saw it. The truth, the farmhouse, the grave, the rain, the darkness. She saw Evelyn buried beneath the soil, still alive, still breathing, still fighting. Then she saw the tall figure emerge from the woods. It approached the grave, slowly, silently, watching the disturbed earth, watching Evelyn struggle below. The creature knelt beside the grave. Its long fingers dug into the soil, not attacking, not hunting, helping. The vision became clearer. The thing pulled Evelyn from the ground. Moments before she would have died, Mason felt chills race through his body. Evelyn stared in disbelief. "No." Olivia looked directly at her. "It saved you." The room went silent. For 30 years, Evelyn had believed she died inside that grave. But the memories told a different story. The creature had pulled her out, barely alive, broken, traumatized, yet alive. Then another image appeared. A cabin deep in the woods, far from civilization, far from roads, far from people. The creature had taken her there, protected her, hidden her. For weeks she drifted between life and death, unable to understand what had happened. unable to return home, unable to trust anyone. Then one day she disappeared. Not because she died, because she chose to leave. She vanished into another state, started a new life, under a different name, never returning, never contacting anyone. Terrified her family would find her again. Terrified they would finish what they started. Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. The memories were not hers. They belonged to Olivia. Yet somehow she knew they were true. The spirit slowly looked at Mason, then at Walter, then at Olivia, and finally she whispered, "I never died." The realization hit all of them at once. There was never a ghost, never a haunting, never a spirit trapped in the farmhouse. What Olivia had experienced all these years was something far stranger. The memories had been passed through generations, like an echo, like a wound that refused to heal. The nightmares, the visions, the emotions, all of them belonged to Evelyn, a woman who survived, a woman who vanished, a woman whose story had never been told. Then one final memory surfaced, the strongest one of all. Evelyn as an old woman, living quietly under another name, holding a photograph of her daughter, watching from afar, making sure she was safe. The image faded, and with it, the presence inside Olivia disappeared. The room instantly felt lighter, warmer, peaceful. The crushing pressure that had followed them for months was gone, completely gone. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds. For the first time in a long time, Olivia smiled, a real smile, not forced, not frightened, just peaceful. Weeks later, Walter gave his statement to local authorities. An investigation was reopened. Old records were examined. Family secrets that had remained buried for decades finally came to light. Several surviving relatives refused to cooperate. Others admitted pieces of the truth. The complete story was never fully proven, but enough evidence emerged to reveal that Evelyn had never simply run away. Someone had tried very hard to erase her. As for the tall figure in the woods, nobody ever identified it. Walter never saw it again. Mason never saw it again. Neither did Olivia. Perhaps it was something supernatural. Perhaps it was something humanity simply doesn't understand. Or perhaps it was exactly what Evelyn believed it to be. A guardian, a silent watcher that appeared only when darkness became too great. Months later, Olivia visited the abandoned farmhouse one final time. The building was collapsing. Nature had nearly reclaimed it. Before leaving, she placed flowers near the old grave. Then she quietly said 6 words, "Thank you for protecting her." A cold breeze moved through the trees. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a tall figure standing among the woods, watching, not threatening, not angry, simply watching. Then it was gone, and it never appeared again. Some family secrets create ghosts, others create legends, but the most terrifying secrets are the ones that turn out to be true. So, this was the story. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And for more true horror mysteries and terrifying encounters, be sure to follow Nightmare Files. Until next time, stay safe, and don't look back when you hear your name in the dark.